when we're in those moments, like we are right now around the world, to understand that it might feel dark, but we're not at the end of the story right now.
Hello, and welcome to Coffee with Jesus. I am Todd Uebele, and I'll be your host for this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to be your typical episode of Coffee with Jesus. This episode is being released on Purim, and given given the world events that have been happening the last few days, we kind of made a last-minute change to our schedule. We're very blessed to have Ms. Lisa Fogelson with us. Lisa, as you might recall, she is a Jewish educator, and so she's got some special insight to both Purim and to what is happening in the Middle East. And Lisa, I really appreciate you joining us on the show. Because of the last-minute recording and the quickness to get this released with the ever-changing world events that are happening right now, this episode may not be the level of editing that you're used to. We're going to record it, and I'm going to do a quick edit, and we're going to try to get it out. So I appreciate your grace with us for this episode. And Lisa, I appreciate your grace and your flexibility. And I guess we can go ahead and just dive right in. Um, One of the things you had mentioned when we were talking is how in the book of Esther, how Haman was tied back to Amalek. So I thought maybe we could start with that, and if you wouldn't mind, just dive into that.
Sure, I would love to. Haman and Amalek is a great question. I should tell you though, your listeners are going to have some grace with me because today is a fast day, a traditional fast day on the Jewish calendar. Right before Purim, we're still marking the fast of Esther and crying out to God. It's very much still living history as today casualties on the American side. We've seen civilian casualties in Israel right now. It's the time to be fasting and to crying out to God. So please have some grace for me. Also, I'm a little loopy at this hour. Amalek is a character that shows up in Genesis, again in Exodus, again in Deuteronomy, and we actually follow him through much more time than just that. So this is interesting, and it's really key to understanding not just the whole story of Purim, but the whole story of the Jewish people from the start all the way until now, and really how God works behind the scenes. We are introduced to Haman in chapter 3 of Esther. It says, sometime afterward, King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes, promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. He advanced him and seated him higher than any of his fellow officials. So we're given his lineage, Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. Now, who was Agag? He was the king of Amalek, who was in, I think it's in First Samuel's, that Saul doesn't destroy completely. There's all sorts of problems that happen with that. So who's Amalek that they're trying to destroy them in the first place? And that's where we're going all the way back to Exodus. The Jews have left Egypt. They have ventured out into the wilderness. The world has seen the miracles that God has done for the Jewish people. And much later in the Torah, we talk about the laws of war and how to conquer the land. And one of the things that we're told is that we have to remember Amalek. Amalek attacked the Jewish people from the rear when they were leaving Egypt and went after the young. And it was kind of the original attack of terrorism where they didn't fight with integrity against the soldiers at the front. They went after the weaklings in the back. And because of that, when we are told how to go into the land of Israel, we are told to remember what Amalek did to us. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 20. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear or awe of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down and the stragglers were in your rear. Therefore, when the Lord your God grants you safety from your enemies around you in the land that your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. Do not forget. And that happens again in the story of Agag, that the Jews don't fully eradicate Amalek. And now we see in the story of Purim who shows up as our villain, but Haman the Agagite, related to Amalek, who was the original source of this. So already the story is set that we know who our enemy is. And the story kind of continues to today, which is where we are now. And the whole story of Purim begins in Persia, which is obviously modern day Iran. On Saturday morning, all over Israel, um, Shabbat gatherings, and not just in Israel, but around the world, it was a special Torah reading called Parshat Zachor, the Shabbat of remembering. And what we remember is what Amalek did to us, that section in Deuteronomy of remember what Amalek did to you and make sure that you kind of blot out evil when you come across it. When you are in the land and things are good, make sure you still seek out the destruction of true evil. And as that was being read in synagogues all through Israel, Operation Lion's Roar and Epic Fury took off, truly attacking the modern day Haman and evil that wishes to destroy all that's good in the world. So it's so very, very connected to each other. It's just unbelievable how the timing has worked out.
All right, so why don't we go into next about how Purim started?
So Purim tells the story of the book of Esther. And it's important to know from the very beginning that Esther is Hebrew for hidden. Her name means concealed or hidden, and that's really the theme that's going to take us through the whole book, because it's a book of miracles that reads like a book of history. The whole story begins when King Xerxes is giving a massive feast to celebrate his military victories, and he rules over 120 provinces from India to Ethiopia, from Hodu to Kush. And unbelievably, last week, who was Israel in negotiations with, and in discussions with, but India and Ethiopia. They had meetings with both countries as part of all of what's going on in the world. The story begins when the king is throwing this big feast, showing off his riches, everyone drinking to their heart's content. 180 days. It's a party beyond parties, beyond parties. And he requests his wife to leave the party she is throwing and to present herself at the feast he is at. She refuses, and immediately one of his top advisors, who we actually think is later identified as Haman, he's given a different name here, says, you got to get rid of her because otherwise everybody else is going to act the same way. This is going to be, everybody's going to copy what she did, and husbands will have no say over their wives anymore, and the queen is kicked out. And that's where our story really begins. There's no queen. Obviously, you need a queen. We're going to go through this very quickly, but basically, a beauty contest is thrown throughout the land. We're going to keep this real PG. A beauty contest is thrown throughout the land, and who rises to the position of queen but this girl Esther, who's an orphan. She's in the care of her uncle Mordecai, who is been exiled from Israel and from Jerusalem, from the tribe of Benjamin, but he's actually identified, and this is the first time in history that the word is used, as the Judite, the Jew. And so this is the story of Mordecai, the Jew, and Queen Esther. And she's in the palace as queen. He's overhearing stuff and investigating how it's going. And he hears two guys plotting to kill the king and says, hey, let me get word to my niece and let's make this not happen. And he saves the king's life. This is written down. It's recorded. Fantastic. No parade, no anything, but Mordecai's done the right thing. And all is good and well. Great. Enter our villain Haman. Our villain Haman is ego embodied. And everybody bows to Haman except Mordecai the Jew refuses to bow down. And this makes Haman crazy. He can't stand that anybody won't bow down to him. And the same way when Vashti was exiled, he looks at Mordecai not bowing down as, and now everyone's going to copy him. And nobody will respect me anymore. So I don't need to just get rid of Mordecai. We need to get rid of everybody. And Haman requests permission to kill all the Jews, and it's granted. So the edict goes out, kill all the Jews. A specific day is selected by casting lots, and that's where the holiday gets its name of Purim. The Jews are to be killed on the 13th month of the day of Adar, and messages are sent out throughout the land, and everybody, well, all the Jews are in a panic. They are in mourning. They are distraught because what could they possibly do? How does one defend themselves from an empire that's trying to kill you? So, what's to be done? Well, Mordecai sees this edict and goes to Esther and says, "Hey, what are you going to do about this? Look what's happening. You've got to go appeal to the king." And she said, "I can't. If I show up in the king's throne room without permission, I'm toast. Off with my head," kind of thing. And he writes back to her these most profound words, and they're very popular. He writes to her saying, "Don't imagine that you, of all the Jews, will escape with your life by being in the king's palace. On the contrary, if you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another source, while you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, perhaps you've attained a royal position for just such a time." And, Mordecai demonstrates this absolute faith in God, that we will receive deliverance. We will not be fully destroyed. God is going to come to our aid. But maybe he'd like to use you as an instrument. And even more so, don't think for a moment that it's someone else's job. It's your job. And Esther, seeing this, writes back saying, "It's not just my job. If it's my job and it's everybody's job, then I need the support of everybody. We have to be united." And she writes back that everybody should fast on her behalf and submit their prayers to God, that she should succeed with the king. This was their best shot. This is the big line here. She prepares to go to the king and says, "And if I perish, I perish. If I'm lost, I'm lost." She's willing to sacrifice. It's not martyrdom, it's bravery. She's willing to put herself in a position and say, "Let me be your instrument, God. Let me be part of the salvation and relief. Let me be part of the deliverance." When I look, I'm going to jump for a second into modern geopolitics. When I look at what's happening right now in Iran, the people of Iran have put themselves on the line. Over the past few weeks, we've seen these protests where thousands and thousands and thousands have been brave enough to step forward and say, "Not in my name," and they've been killed for it. And if that's not permission and pleading to the rest of the world to help them, I think, the people of Iran are being freed from an evil regime that has been oppressing them. And it takes that courage of standing up and saying, "If I'm lost, I'm lost. If I perish, I perish." There comes a point when your values outweigh your fear, when doing what's right matters more than doing what's safe.
Yes, I love that. I love that. There comes a point when your values outweigh your fear. And I love that because, I mean, nobody really likes war, you know? We've talked before. I've been to war. It's not fun. But to me, it's not about war. You know, the media, they're reporting all the bombs and all the missiles. It's not about that. It's about the people, right? The people of Iran, they're putting their values above their fear. Esther did the same thing. You know, she was afraid at first, but after that wake up call from her uncle, she put her values above her fear. And that's why the Jews are still alive today because of what she did. Put herself on the line for her people, you know. And that is extremely brave. And the people of Iran right now, they've been out on the streets for weeks. They're getting shot and they know when they go out and protest at night, they're probably going to get shot, but they're doing it anyway. And
Right.
that's bravery. And that's what this whole thing is about. It's about the bravery and the freedom that the Persian people deserve. And I
100%.
wish we would see more of that in the
And you
media.
know what? It's not just the Persians, it's the people of Lebanon and of Syria, it's the
Yes,
people of Yemen, it's the people of Gaza, it's the people who are living under Iran and its proxies
yes,
that aren't being given the opportunities to be free thinkers, to develop ideas, and to thrive in the world. It's true evil that they are living under, and as they discover it, um, you know, thank God there are countries that are willing to stand up and help them, and people that are willing to do that. It's it's the ultimate in God saying, you were strangers in a strange land. Like, this is how you help the oppressed, and you stand up for what's right. And we see that happening now. There was an F-15 pilot, a female F-15 pilot, a U.S. one, which is just so awesome, downed over Kuwait. And the locals coming and thanking her and helping her and turning her into a hero. It's just incredible to see. So many of the Arab states are not backing Iran, which is refreshing, to say the least. And so let's see. Let's get to the end of the story. So Esther goes to the king. It's a whole story of back and forth and back and forth and negotiations and diplomatic talks here and there and feasts and who's invited and who's not invited and roundtable discussions. But the bottom line is she tells the king, someone's trying to destroy my people. And the king is mortified to hear it and said, who's doing it? And she says it's Haman. And now the law in Persia, no, you feel, well, nobody's higher than the king, but the law was actually higher than the king. The king could not change the law. He could just add to it. So once the decree had gone out to kill all the Jews, that wasn't going to change. But the king sent a new decree that the Jews could defend themselves and fight back. And in doing that, we see kind of this second big piece of courage of the story of Purim. The first is Esther approaching the king and that political story. And the second is this military component. The Jews had to arm themselves and fight off attackers who had just been permitted to kill them. I mean, that is the definition of genocide if you've ever heard of it. It wasn't that, self-defense. It was literally just permission for genocide. And the Jews were given permission to fight back, and they did. And that fighting happened. And in the city of Shushan, it took a little bit longer. But ultimately they won, and the festivities was so great and so grand and so phenomenal that they made it an everlasting holiday for the Jewish people, a remembrance of always. And it's an incredible, incredible story that, between the political and the military, it all came together and we were saved. And the craziest part of the whole thing is, you'll notice there was kind of one character totally missing from the whole story, except one line. And that is where it all changes. Our plot twists at the beginning of chapter 6. Because it says, that night, sleep deserted the king, and he ordered the book of records to be brought, and it was read to the king. And this is right before Esther goes and starts approaching the king on these things. In Jewish tradition, when it says the king like that, it's an illusion that it's not just talking about the Persian king. But that night sleep deserted the king, and he ordered the book of records to be brought, and it was read. That God was almost awoken to what was going on, and everything at that moment shifted. It was this massive moment of plot shift. We call it the nahafochu, that this is the moment where it was overturned, that God enters into the story in a visible way, and everything starts unraveling for Haman. Up until this point, God's been planting some seeds. Esther's in the palace, more like everyone's doing the right thing, but you don't really see the picture of the tapestry that's being woven. There's just all these loose threads. But now all of a sudden, God enters the picture, and what seemed like this totally disjointed story starts pulling together into this magnificent tapestry. And so by the end of the story, it's not a a celebration of a military victory. It's not a celebration of a political victory. Purim is a holiday of hidden miracles, where we see that even in our logical lives, God is still calling the shots at every possible moment. God is behind everything that's happening. He's pulling the strings. He's putting the right people in the right places at the right time. And our greatest prayer in all of it is to ask God to be used as his instrument, that maybe this is our time to have the courage to step forward and to do it. And, you know, when we're in those moments, like we are right now around the world, to understand that it might feel dark, but we're not at the end of the story right now. We have over and over and over again, the story of the Jewish people is that it turns around, that it's not over until it's over, that they rise to destroy us and God comes to our aid. It is only God that we're dependent on. And so we just ask to be instruments of God's presence here and of his mission, and to do it in the best way we can. And the miracles that are going on all around us, and the level of unification that's possible as humanity and as goodness to overcome the forces of evil in the world, and that together, it's all possible.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I love, and I know we get into this in the next episode that we release, our regularly scheduled episode, but I just like to close just by saying, there are times where we can't see God. When we're in the midst of that darkness, we can't necessarily see, but he's working, you know. More like Mordecai had said, God will raise someone up, and it kind of woke Esther up. She was afraid. She couldn't see God working behind the scenes, but she told Mordecai, all right, have everybody fast, have everybody pray, you know. Um, one time when I was in Afghanistan, we were getting hit repeatedly over a couple hours, probably about a dozen times. And we couldn't see what was happening. We were in the bunker. We just heard the shells landing.
Oh,
But outside the base, there was a quick reaction force hunting those people down. You know, we had a blimp, and yes, we still use blimps. We had a blimp with night vision that could track their locations, and we could send out the quick reaction force. We couldn't see that in the bunker, but it was happening, and we got through it. Sometimes we can't see God helping us when we're in the midst of that storm, but He is. He is there. He is helping us, and He will get us through it. So, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us again. I appreciate you bearing with me. I know this was very last minute. For those of you who are listening, I appreciate your grace. This episode may be a little bit more rough than you used to, so thank you for bearing with us. Um, and just know that no matter what you're going through, God is working for you. He is protecting you and He's helping you, even when you can't see it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and may God bless each and every one of you.
happy Purim.